right, welcome to tonight's live stream, Wednesday Night Live, presented by Pioneer Baptist Church. I am Pastor Edwin Lugo, the pastor of Pioneer Baptist Church. I am your host this week and every week, and glad that you're here to join us this Wednesday evening. So if you are here, comment in the comment section, whether that's on Facebook or whether that's on YouTube. Let us know that you're here. It's always helpful to know, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but I want to wait and give you an opportunity to get in here with us. Sometimes it takes just a little bit. Okay, so all right, so I know at least my wife is watching downstairs, so that's awesome to know. And anybody else who jumps on here, I see we have a few viewers on both YouTube and on Facebook. Good, I got a second member of my family as well. All right, so good. Josiah's here, Anita's here, Cassie's here. Every once in a while, sometimes it takes a little longer for certain comments to come up. But let me know when you've joined in. All right. There we go. We got a couple more people. Terry Cross joined us on Facebook. Glad you guys could make it. I hope you're having a great week. Every week, this is we'll be here with new content, Bible study through the book of Ecclesiastes. I really do appreciate you being here. As I say every single week, in order for this to work as well as it possibly can, then we need your input. We need you to answer. We need you to interact. We need you to write things so that we know that you're interacting with us. And so I'm just giving you a little bit of time to inform us, and I'm trying to get things working here on my end, that you are here, making sure we get everybody here. Again, just write it in the comment section if you're joining together with us. Some of you already have. My family's here, Terry Cross here, Anita's here. We're missing a couple of you, but hopefully you'll be able to jump in here pretty soon and join together with us. And what we usually do is we front load a lot of the first half or the first part of this live stream with just some fun and interesting stuff. That way we make sure people are able to get in for the Bible study part of it for sure. And we don't want you to miss that. And so we're going to get started here in just a second, whether we have everybody that joins in with us already here with us or not. So I'm not sure where the other folks are, but I hope they're doing well wherever they are. And we're going to jump in here and go ahead and get started. Even though there's maybe just a few of us, it'll give you an opportunity to answer, and we'll get some of your thoughts, which will be interesting. And okay, the Kellys are here, so that's good to see. All right, here we go. We're going to start with the bestest. Right? This is a weekly segment called the bestest. And I thought this was kind of an interesting one for us to think about and go through. And YouTube's doing something crazy on me here, so give me just a second. I hope we're still okay. If we're on YouTube and still okay, give me a thumbs up, because for some reason my YouTube on my end just crashed. So that's never a good thing. But we'll see what goes on here. Maybe if you have them both up, maybe you have both Wednesday Night Live going, and I'm trying to get it back up and see what happens here. It's being a little difficult on me. So we will see. It's always fun. We never know what it is. We never know what it's going to be. So I am not sure what has happened. I know we're still going on YouTube. So we'll see. Okay. Oh, all right. So I think we're good here. Okay, we still got a thumbs up. Excuse the reverb on audio. I will stop that here in just a minute, and we'll get that taken care of. If you're hearing any of that, I do apologize. We will see. Okay. Oh boy, I don't know how to get that back now. That's going to be kind of crazy. To keep up with your comments, this is going to be crazy. I apologize I do not know why this has always got to be so difficult. It can never be easy. Now Safari doesn't want to come up at all. And so, oh, I know why. Because it's not on Safari. It's on Chrome. So obviously it's a great start to tonight. I expect nothing less. I'm just trying to keep the audio from coming through the TV here. I'm actually going to go, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I'm going to turn down the audio over here so you don't have to hear that anymore. Okay, now we are back. We're here with the bestest. Hopefully we can get everything somewhat normal here. Here is the category for this week's the bestest. Okay, and that is this question here. What is the best place for leisure or for activity? For either leisure or activity, it doesn't matter. If you have a day off and you can spend it now, your house doesn't count. Under your covers, in your with your head on your pillow doesn't count. Netflix and chill doesn't count. You got to give me some place to go. Maybe there's a specific place you like to go hike. Maybe there's a bookstore you like to go find a quiet corner in. Maybe there's a coffee shop or a restaurant you like to do the same thing in. Some place you can just escape from everywhere else and really just enjoy for pleasure, for leisure. Some sort of enjoyable activity that you just like to go away and get away from everything else. And so Gabe says the forest. That is, Gabe is always saying, if we ever buy a place, I want it to be someplace close to the woods. He said the woods don't even have to be ours. They just have to be close to us so that I can go and enjoy them. Josiah says the trampoline park. He keeps not bothering us, it's the wrong word. Keeps saying he wants to go to one, but we keep saying we can't go to one right now, but hopefully sometime soon we'll be able to. We just haven't been able to yet. Anita says the beach. Going to the coast is always a good time. Silver Falls State Park is always enjoyable. We went for a good hike there. Oh man, it feels like it wasn't too long ago, but it was probably much longer ago than I thought it was. I feel like it was sometime this winter. And that was enjoyable. Really enjoyed getting out there. And the nice thing about Silver Falls is that you don't have to go too far from the parking lot to see some really great stuff. You can keep hiking. You can go further if you want to. But that's the nice thing about Silver Falls. You don't have to go too far if you don't want to. Let's see here. Eagle Creek Trail, which, from my understanding, is back open again. It was closed for a while, if I remember correctly, but I think it's open now. I don't think I've done that myself, but I would like to sometime soon. Cassie says, really any coffee shop, but especially a coffee shop like Well and Good. If you've never been to Well and Good, they're there kind of like in the Tualatin Tigard area. It's a neat place to go. It's owned by some Christians and a Christian company, and they do a really good job there. Cassie says also on a warm, sunny beach with a good book. That's a good place to be as well. So there you go. You have some places maybe that you can go and enjoy, whether it's the forest, the trampoline park, the beach, Silver Falls, Well and Good, Eagle Creek Trail. Those are all possibilities to look at and to consider. Now, after we've looked at the bestest, and if you have any other ones, keep them coming. And you know what? Before I forget, I wanted to say this, and I forgot, but some things for us to pray about. I know I'm just kind of bouncing all over the place here as we're getting things ready, but some things for us to pray about. I got a phone call from JH today. I ran to the grocery store real quick. He called me while I was in the grocery store, left the message, and he's in the hospital, but not to be alarmed. It's not really bad. I think he just had a bladder infection, and so I think they're just taking care of him. Shouldn't be there too long, but he did call me from there, and so I wanted to pass that along. And then I think Azariah and Katie are driving back up from California as we speak. And so pray for them as they travel back up home as well. All right, life hack is the next the next segment here before we get to the book of Ecclesiastes. We have two more. We have fun tips and tricks, life hacks, and we also have an interesting fact of the day. I was reading this and found this kind of interesting, a certain life hack when it comes to cooking or prepping. Did you know that peppers with 3 bumps on the bottom tend to be sweeter and better for eating, while peppers with 4 bumps tend to be firmer and better for cooking? Now, sometimes if you look at this on the internet, it'll say that this is not true, that it's false, it's a misnomer. But what people tend to do, the mistake, the misnomer that people add to it, is that they say that one of the peppers is a male pepper and one of them is a female pepper, and that's the misnomer. That is not true, that there's a male or female pepper. But it is true that the peppers with 3 bumps on the bottom tend to be, not always, but tend to be sweeter and better for eating, and peppers with 4 bumps on the bottom tend to be firmer and better for cooking. So there you go. Next time you go to eat one or to cook with one, you can turn it on the bottom and see how many bumps it has on the bottom and see which one is best for you. You're welcome. All right, fact of the day. This one really blew my mind, because I have the ability to do what this thing talks about here, but many people do not, and it really blew my mind. Did you know that 1 in 3 people cannot snap their fingers? They can't do this. Can't snap their fingers. 1 in 3 people, 33% of the world's population, cannot snap their fingers. Can you snap your fingers? Yes? No? Maybe sometimes. I had a friend in high school, it's the strangest thing, and maybe you do it, and so maybe I think you're strange too. She did not. Some people snap like differently. I do my big middle finger and my thumb. She would go all the way to her ring finger to snap, and it was weird. I'd never seen somebody do that, but that's how she would snap. To me, that was weird. Maybe I'm the weird one. Maybe most people don't do middle finger, but mine is middle finger and snap. Some people maybe do point. I don't know. Can you do pointing finger? Maybe. Can you snap? I always thought that was kind of an interesting thing to see how people did it differently. Anita says she's a snapper. Anybody else? Is anybody out there can't snap? Nobody snap? Yeah, so we miss JH and Jeannie. I talk to him about every 2 weeks, and he misses us too, and keeps saying how much he can't wait till he gets back. But I have to ask JH if he knows how to snap. But 1 in 3 people do not know how to snap, or cannot snap, I guess. Kind of interesting thing. Let me know if you're a snapper out there. All right, we're going to get to the book of Ecclesiastes and life under the sun. We kind of cut it off. We didn't get the whole way through Ecclesiastes chapter 3, so we kind of picked back up again this week in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. But just as a reminder, so we can get kind of a running start here on this week, we talked last week about this idea that God is accomplishing His purpose in our life, and each of these things that were mentioned in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, especially verses 2 through 8, are for our good in His time. And Solomon is reminding us that not everything is monotonous or meaningless, but God has a purpose in His time for all of these things, and that is important for us to remember. We also talked about this truth as well, that life is a gift from God that is both lived with an eternal perspective, but that can also be enjoyed now as well. And so we live life with an eternal perspective, but there are also many good gifts and wonderful gifts that God gives us right now. And so those are some of the thoughts and the ideas that we were discussing last week. And again, in order for this to work, we need you, especially maybe with a few people out that would usually be joining us online. We really need you to answer and to communicate with us to keep this thing rolling. If not, I'll just keep teaching through it all, and I'll just do it all myself. But I like it better whenever you participate. And maybe if you're sitting there, because I can see how many people are with us and watching, maybe you're sitting there just watching and you haven't commented yet today. We'd love for you to comment with us and join in the conversation with us. But we're going to turn our attention to verses 15 through 22 of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And as we read these verses, I want you to consider this question. What is the primary thought of verses 15 through 22 of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. So I'm going to read them here. It says, "That which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been. And God requireth that which is past. And moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. I said in my heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Every one thing befalleth them. As the one dieth, so dieth the other. They have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. All go unto one place. All are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? Wherefore I perceive that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for this is his portion, for that is his portion. For who shall bring him to see what shall be after him?" Now, there are a lot of different thoughts and different avenues that Solomon goes in these short verses, but there is really one main theme of these verses that Solomon considers. When you look at verses, when we read verses 15 through 22, what theme, what idea stands out to you whenever you read these verses? Maybe you need to go back and read them again. I would say it's primarily kind of in some of those middle verses that he gets his theme across. Hi, David. Good to see you joining us as well. So glad you could be here. What are what is that major theme that you see David dealing with in these verses here? I'll wait just a minute for some people to jump on here and to respond and see if you kind of notice or see what. And by the way, it's a theme, it's an idea that Solomon has already addressed in chapters that have gone by already. Things, thoughts that he's already considered. And by the way, it's a thought that many of us have considered and we know as a reality. And I would say that it's a thought that maybe has entered into the hearts and minds of people more in the last 12 months than any other time. And I think the primary thought that Solomon is getting across is this. Death is coming. It's coming. When you go back and you read through those verses, especially some of those middle verses, he talks about death very bluntly, both for humans and for animals, for everybody. Cassie says, right, the end of life. He is speaking very clearly about the end of life and what happens at the end. He's always keeping at the forefront of his mind right now that death is coming, that life, death, time, eternity, those are all some of the ingredients of our existence. Now, verse 15 gives us a wonderful reminder. It says, "That which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and God requireth that which is past." It reminds us that God is in control. But there's a really interesting phrase that I want us to see here in this verse. It's sitting right there again, the very end of that verse. It says, it says this: "God requireth that which is past." Oh, some other folks are given some of these themes as well. Maybe not a major thing, but the first thing that came to mind was live in the moment with the future in mind. And again, I think that's a great way, Solomon is saying this is the now, this is the life we've been given, but the future's in mind. Death is coming. Every breath, every second, and it's not being morbid. It's just the reality that every breath and every second and every minute, we're a little bit closer to the future, to the end of our life. And Terry mentions this as well. Death is the great equalizer, and we'll look at that here in just a minute as well. But I want us to take just a minute. I want us to think about this really interesting phrase that Solomon writes at the end of verse 15. He says, "God requireth that which is past." The question I want you to think about is, what do you think "God requireth that which is past" means? What does that mean? And I'm going to actually if you wanted to go word for word literal translation, it would mean God seeks, or God looks for, or God seeks after that which hurries along. And I know that may even more muddy the water. God requires that which is past, or God seeks what hurries along. But with life and death in perspective, what do you think Solomon meant when he wrote those words? God requireth that which is past. Or again, God looks for, seeks after that which hurries along. I'll give you a minute to think through that. Maybe give some thoughts or some answers to that. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you have access to some sort of resources to look at it really quickly, a little bit deeper. Maybe you can think of some thoughts that come to mind. I have one that I'll share with you as well that I think is an interesting thought concerning what Solomon here says in verse 15. But I'll give you a minute to chime in really quickly. Anybody? He wants to know, or God wants to know, what we did with the time we had on earth. This is so that's a good answer, Emily. This is the way that I wrote it. That time moves quickly and it gets away from us, right? That's the thing that hurries along. Life hurries along. Time moves quickly and gets past. Just today after dinner and before I came up for this, I was standing next to Gabe and just noticing, he's getting closer and closer to being almost exactly as tall as Cassie, and he's creeping up and he'll pass me in no time. And boy, that time just moves so quickly, it gets away from us. Time moves quickly and gets away from us. But God has kept track of all of it. And he will call into account what has been done with the time that each one of us has. Solomon was reminded of that and reminds us of that because he's talking about life as it happens. But he's also doing it with this eternal perspective, with the future in mind. And he's reminding us that while we live our life and it just flies by day, and things have happened in our past and it's gone past, and that all of those things, when it moves quickly, God's keeping track of all of it, and he will call into account what has been done with the time that we have. And so one of the things that I want us to think of, tying into verses 16 and 17, says, I think this is a good interpretation. Whenever you look at how it ties into verses 16 and 17, it says this. It says, moreover, or, in conjunction with, also along with that thought, and moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment. That wickedness was there. And the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. Excuse me. So, Kristen, where you have resources that said God seeks the persecuted, I think you could also say that God sees everything. The good that happens to these people, the bad that happens to these people, he's keeping track of all of these things. Things that we lose track of, God is keeping track of all of those things. But that brings us to the question, right? So we understand that God is keeping track of all of life. God has it under his perspective. He's watching it all in real time. Nothing gets past him. But that brings up the question that how, and this is a question that sometimes people wrestle with, how can God be in control? And how can God see everything that's happening and there still be so much sin and so much evil in the world? How come nothing is happening with that? And I think this is an idea that Solomon wrestles with. But I want to remind us today, because sometimes you might wrestle with that question. Sometimes I might wrestle with that question. God, if you're in control, God, if you see all of this, then why do you let this sinfulness and why do you let this evil go unjudged or unpunished? Well, first of all, I think something that's really important for us to remember is that God will judge when history is done. And he won't miss a beat. He won't miss a thing. He won't miss anything. So often we think, well, God, why don't you do anything? And the reality is, we understand from the Bible that God will do something. That God will one day judge all of this. But verse 18 is also a reminder that God is, even in this life, exposing man. Look at what verse 18 says again. He said, I said in my heart concerning the state of the sons of men, that God might manifest them. In other words, that God might bring it to light, that God might make it known, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. You know what? Every day that we live, the reality of what we see is, and he's going to make this comparison here in just a second, that when somebody lives life without God, they live life with no moral discernment, no moral compass, no moral lawgiver, no God whatsoever, they become more like beasts. Do whatever pleases you, live however you want to, because in your mind you're thinking, I just live, and I live for the now, and then I die, and that's it, just like an animal. And so it's exposing. God is even exposing the sinfulness of man's heart in that way, when people live like beasts. Now, but it's a reminder that God is both manifesting people's hearts now, but one day he's keeping track of everything, and one day he will judge all of that sin. He will judge all of that evil. Now, verses 19 through 20 can sometimes be really misinterpreted. Verse 19 says, for that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beast, even one thing befalleth them, as the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. Verse 20 says, all go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. These are often misrepresented, because it sounds like Solomon is saying, see, man and beast are exactly like. Death for man and animal are exactly like. What we're going to see here in just a minute, he clearly says that there are differences between men and animals. However, in these verses, Solomon was pointing out two specific similarities. He was pointing out similarities, but he wasn't saying animals and people, when they die, are exactly the same. They're actually very pointed and specific similarities that he asks. What are they? Read through the verses again and notice the specifics of the similarities between man and beast. What are the two similarities at death or concerning death that we have with animals? Because again, Solomon wasn't saying, see, men and animals exactly the same, no difference. No, you'll see here in just a minute in the following verses, there are differences, but he just wanted to point out a few similarities. He wanted to point out some places that we were like each other. What are those ways that we are like each other? What are they? There's two of them. And actually, in my answer, I was kind of giving a couple of them away. I probably should have been a little bit more careful in the way that I worded the question. But what are the similarities? That's what we're looking for. What are the similarities between man and beast in these verses? So Kristen points out one of them. Our bodies will return to dust. Same thing. Our bodies. I was walking today out in the field in our backyard. I was walking around, and the family had walked with us, and then I started walking by myself, and I saw a little bird that had died. It was laying on the side of the road, and first couldn't quite tell what it was, but it was starting to break apart, and you could tell. Well, one day, here pretty soon, that's just gonna be totally gone. It's just gonna seep back into the ground as dust. And so that is one of them. One of them is our bodies roll. Here are the two similarities between a human and an animal. They both die, and they both return to dust. Those were the similarities. Don't be mistaken that Paul is saying, see, we're exactly like when we die. No. The two similarities he's pointing out, we both die, and we both return to dust. Our bodies return to dust. However, look at what he says in verse 21. Notice the differences. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? In other words, men and animals don't have the exact same experiences at death. Look at verse 22. Wherefore I perceive that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his own work, for that is his portion, for who shall bring him to see what shall be after him? In other words, accept life as being a gift from the hand of God and enjoy it while you have the opportunity. Here's the deal. Nobody knows what the future holds. If I sat here, what are we, February 10th, 2021? If I would have sat here a year ago, February 10th, 2020, could have told you, man, all the plans we had for 2020, and almost a month later, things would completely change. You know why? Because I don't know. I'm not certain what the future holds. And even if I did know what the future holds, after my life, I couldn't come back and enjoy it. The reality is, this is the life I have. This is the one that God has given me. And knowing that God is in control allows me to submit to Him and to be at peace. It allows me to know God is, even though I can't control every aspect of life, even though I can't keep up with every aspect of life, even though I can't make sense of every aspect of life, which Solomon has talked about, here's the thing. I know that I serve a God that has it all under His control, and so I'm going to submit to Him and be at peace in His control. Faith, listen to me, we're to live by faith. Part of faith is learning to live with the seeming inconsistencies of life, and instead live by the promises of God. As we kind of exit chapter 3 and we jump into chapter 4, I want to sum it up with just this one thought here that I want to share with you, and it's this. We will never be able to fully explain life, but we will experience life. Okay, Solomon's dealing with experiences of life and trying to explain everything. You and I will never be able to fully explain everything about life. But you and I have and will experience life. And we will choose to either endure it or enjoy it. Plain and simple. And so I leave, as we exit chapter 3 and we get ready to go into chapter 4, I leave that with you. Stop trying to explain everything in life. It's an impossible task. Experience life, and you will. And as you do that, you have a choice to either endure it or to enjoy it as a gift from God. But I can't make that choice for you. You have to make it for yourself. How will you face life? Again, think about the words of Paul in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 11. He says, "Not that I speak in respect of one, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content." This is what I've learned. This is how I've chosen. I'm going to be content in this life. I'm going to enjoy what God has given me in this. I might not be able to explain it all. I might not explain why I'm in jail. I might not be able to explain why I couldn't come see you. I may not be able to explain, this snake bite, or may not be able to explain all of these things. But I've learned to be content. I'm choosing to not just endure all of these things, but to enjoy them. Now, we come to the end of chapter 3, we transition to chapter 4, and again, Solomon has been looking at life from a very detached, very philosophical point of view, seeing it as meaningless and monotonous. But again, he wanted to kind of get down into the nitty-gritty and begin to see people really live, and he begins to look, what we're going to see here in chapter 4, is he begins to dive into, it's almost as if he's observing real people's lives, like real people within his kingdom, or there in Israel, or there in Jerusalem, and he's watching them actually, not just philosophically, he's observing them live life, and realizing in all of their situations that their lives were not monotonous, and that their lives were full of meaning. And so in chapter 4, Solomon investigates life from a few different perspectives, from 4 different places, and we're going to go to each one of those places. I don't think we're going to get to all of them tonight, but we'll get to at least 2 of them, I think, tonight. And the very first place that Solomon goes is he goes to the courtroom. He goes to the courtroom, and we're going to read verses 1 through 3 together. He says this, "So I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun. Behold, the tears of such as were oppressed. They had no comforter. And on the side of the oppressor there is power, but they had no comforter. Wherefore I praise the dead, which are already dead, more than the living, which are yet alive. Yea, better is he than both they, which hath not yet been, who hath not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Here now is Solomon in the courtroom. I'm going to ask you a question here in just a minute. Solomon is in the courtroom. He is in, and this isn't just, this isn't just civil court. This is legislature. This is legalities. This is very politically driven. I want you to understand that this is very politically driven, and Solomon sees some very interesting things in politics. And when I began to read these verses, I want to just consider this question: what's one word that comes to mind? And I know this is, boy, Pastor, you're playing with fire. What's one word that comes to mind when you think about politics? Go ahead, I'll wait. I want people to answer. I want one word, not diatribes, not long sentences or paragraphs. When you think about politics, what's the one word that comes to mind? Kristen, that's two. That's two words, Kristen. Gabe says suits. Josiah says dumb. Fred Clayton says lies. Kristen says power struggles. I'll give it to her though. Anita Carley also says lies. Emily Tucker says division. So keep going if you have one. Liars. Power. Okay. I'm giving you a hard time, Kristen. I know I am. Anybody else? Power. Liars. Dumb. Suits. Power struggle. Lies. Division. For me, the first hate says David Tucker. I'm waiting for any other ones that jump in. For me, the first word that comes to mind when I thought about it was the word corruption. And maybe that's just an umbrella term for some of these things, right? There's just, people use power struggles and power to corrupt. They use lying to corrupt. They use divisions to corrupt. The hypocrisy that is there. It's unbelievably corrupt system. You know what's amazing to me is when Solomon, all these thousands of years ago, looked into the political system. You know what he saw? He didn't see suits. Sorry, Gabe. But he saw liars. He saw hypocrites. He saw division. He saw hatred. He saw confusion. He saw corruption. All of these things that we've written here, thousands of years ago, Solomon saw those same things within their political system. And here's the hard thing. Even if a good man is in control, let's say Solomon, obviously we know David was the king of Israel, Solomon was the king of Israel. Even if they're good people, and even if they're good leaders, it's impossible to guarantee the integrity of every officer and every leader under you in government. And we've seen that happen time and time again. And here is Solomon, and he's sitting in this courtroom, and over in one corner he sees the oppressed, and he sees them over there weeping. Excuse me. He sees them over there weeping and crying about the situation they're in. But that weeping and crying does them no good. It gets them no sympathy. It gets them nowhere. And then on the other side, he sees the oppressors who have all the power to do anything, and they're miserable too. And the victims have zero power. They're powerless. And he looks over that whole situation. And I believe that that Solomon comes to three conclusions, or sees three tragedies that honestly are still present today. I think he sees these three things. He says oppression and exploitation. He sees pain and sorrow. He says the oppression and exploitation in what should be the halls of justice. Rather than doing what is right, they're trying to exploit something for their betterment. Hello. If that isn't politics today. He sees pain and sorrow in the lives of innocent people. Hello. If that isn't today. The common man is bearing the brunt of awful, exploitative, awful decisions. And then on top of that, he sees a lack of care from the people who actually have the power to do something. They just don't care. Hello. Once again, does that sound at all familiar? Well, and I've said this before, while I do think we have an obligation to try to put the right kind of people in office, the reality is thousands of years in politics has not changed. There's loads of exploitation. It brings loads of pain and sorrow with little care for the genuine hurts of people. And so it made me think about this. It's kind of sad. What is Solomon's conclusion? At the end of this, when he sees the exploitation, when he sees the pain and sorrow, when he sees the lack of care, what is Solomon's conclusion in the moment? But even more important, what should our conclusion be? So answer that for me. When you look at these three verses and you see what Solomon sees, right? When you see the oppression, exploitation, when you see the pain and sorrow, when you see the lack of care, what was Solomon's conclusion, first of all? But then second, what should our conclusion be when we see that for ourselves in the world that we live in? What was his and what should ours be? You know, it's sad because basically what Solomon was looking at here was that there were some people that thought they could live above the law. And in living above the law, they cause innocent people to suffer. Again, hello, once again, I keep saying it again, just wake up call. Not much has changed in the system in thousands of years. So, Terry Cross hits it, right? Solomon's conclusion in that moment was, man, it's better to be dead than alive. It's so awful down there. I'd rather be dead than alive. That's the conclusion that Solomon comes to. But the follow-up question is, what should our conclusion be? And I'm not going to expose some answer to you here. I'm asking seriously. When we look at our government, and we look maybe at the judicial system, and we look at maybe an unfair, exploitative, oppressive system, and we see people that are going through genuine pain and sorrow, and we see people that have the means to actually show some compassion but lack any kind of care for the common people, what should our conclusion be? Any answers? Anybody? Anybody out there? Anybody? Nobody? Maybe we should think about that question for just a little bit. Maybe that's what you're doing. Think. Consider. And while you do that, we're going to move on to the next place. I think Solomon in three quick verses goes, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be in this courtroom anymore. So we have a couple answers, right? Cassie says to pray, right? To pray for the oppressed, to pray for those maybe that are doing the oppression, that have a lack of care. I think Terry Cross makes a very good point. It's a reminder that government is not the solution to the issues we face in life. It's not the ultimate solution to those things. Emily says there is no hope in anything but God. I think it's very important. And I think we've seen it on both sides of the aisle to be careful not to put all of our eggs of hope into a single basket, and into one single person or even a single political system. Our real hope is in God. Kristen talks about shining a light on God's goodness and the hope that we have in Him. And so these are some good thoughts. And I think, like us, Solomon's like, all right, I'm done with this courtroom, man. This is sad. This is sad. I don't want to be here anymore. So he leaves the courtroom. And Solomon goes to the second place. He goes to the marketplace. He goes to where the common daily laborer works. And let's read in verses 4 through 8. And this is where we're in tonight. We'll stop after verses 4 through 8. I want us to see what he sees in the marketplace. Look at verses 4 through 8. Again, I considered all travail and every right work, labor, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. The fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Better is a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. Then I returned and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother. Yet is there no end of all his labor, neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Neither saith he, for whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity. Yea, it is a sore travail. I think, again, Solomon leaves the courtroom. It's like, man, let me just see the common man laboring. Maybe here I'll see somebody who's just putting in some honest work, which is a gift from God. And I think what we see here is even as he goes to the marketplace, even in the marketplace, he sees four very different people. I'm going to ask you some questions here in just a minute that I think are important for us to wrestle with. The first person he sees the industrious man. Look at verse 4. He says, again, I considered all travail, all work, and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. Here is this person, and he says, I considered all travail and every right work. Here's a man that was working, he was laboring, he was pleased with the work of his hands. And this is interesting. He was pleased with the work of his hands, but he was still sad in his heart. There was still vanity and vexation of spirit. And I think the key to that, the reason that there are some people that can work so hard and put in a genuine, honest day or week, month, year, lifetime of work and still have an emptiness of heart. There's a reason. Because here's the question. What is he saying? Look in verse 4 again. What does he say people often work so hard for? It's right there in the verse. And again, I say it again, hello? Just like the government, the courtroom, the justice system there was very similar today. Again, Ecclesiastes is such an applicable book because so much is still the same. What is he saying people often work so hard for? What do people work so hard for? According to Solomon and Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 4. Okay, Kristen says, praise from others. Terry Cross says, to keep up with the Joneses. That's exactly the way that I wrote it in my notes. To keep up with the Joneses. To get praise from other people. To be envied by other people. In other words, I'm just doing this so that I don't fall behind my neighbors. I don't fall behind these other people. To be able to have what other people have. They're laboring not to produce useful and beautiful or products, not to help people, not even to glorify God. They do it so that they can gain objects, because they, as Fred and Colleen both mentioned there, so that because they care so much about what other people think about them, that they want to stay ahead of other people. And in the end, it's just this constant rat race to stay ahead and to gain these objects, to gain praise from other people, to care about what other people think about them. And so, they're always trying to be better, but not even for the sake of being better, but so that they can stay ahead. And so I ask this question because sometimes you might think, well, isn't competition a good thing? Shouldn't it be good to drive and to try to be the best you can? Competition isn't the issue. Competition itself is not a bad thing. But here's the question: when does competition become an issue? When does competition become an issue? Because I was telling some of the guys about setting goals, and I was talking to Azariah again as I pray for them as they're driving up from California, and he was talking about how they set goals at work for sales. And man, maybe you work in an environment like that, and I'm all for them. Hey, try to set a higher goal than last year. Try to be the best salesman in your building, in your office. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I think we ought to push ourselves to be the best we can. But when does competition turn into something else? So we got some good answers here. I really think so. Kristen says when it defines you. It goes along with what Emily says as well. When it's like your motivation, that's it. My motivation is that competition, is to be better than that person. And then Cassie and Nina together, pride comes in and you can't accept being in second place. And when pride creeps in and you can't accept second place, you know what often happens to people in that situation? They'll do whatever it takes to win. And so competition, and oh man, okay, Fred and Colleen nail it on the head. When the win overtakes the relationship with people. When I wrote it this way in my notes, when being first is more important than being honest, or when being first is more important than a good relationship with people. And so Terry Cross, when you start using devious means to accomplish your goals, right? You start being dishonest. David says when it's the only goal for the day, when it controls every desire. These are major issues. I think we ought to labor, and I think we ought to try to be the best that we can be. And so, there's this balance in it to work hard and be the best, but it's not our primary motivation. It shouldn't be the only thing that defines us. It shouldn't be the thing that is driving us. We just got to keep up with the Joneses, and I'll do anything to make it happen. Okay. Then you see a third man here in the marketplace, and that is, he sees the idle man. He sees the idle man. Look at verses 5 and 6. He says, "The fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Better is a handful with quietness than both the handfuls with travail and vexation of spirit." He comes to the idle man. Very simply, I ask this question: what's the conclusion of verses 5 through 6? Here's a man who's not laboring, who's not working. He looks at him very, very simply, and he comes to a conclusion. What's the conclusion Solomon comes to in verses 5 and 6 concerning the idle man? I'll read him again. "The fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh." That's really where we want to look, right? The fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. What's the conclusion of idleness? Just one verse there, verse 5. The conclusion. What's the end of the idle person? You think about being idle and what he writes here about being idle. Folding his hands, it has the idea maybe of crossing your arms and just relaxing for a moment, but certainly not just for a moment, but for a lifetime, not doing any work, not doing any labor. It's comfortable. So Kristen says it leads to poverty, and it does, without a doubt. It leads to poverty. But even worse than poverty, Emily says poverty comes to him more quickly because he's not worked to provide a means to live. Cassie says wasting away. Terry says he destroys himself. Here's the thing. Lots of people destroy themselves in lives in different ways. The idle man is just a slow, comfortable path that still leads to self-destruction. So it's interesting because we have one person who has no leisure time, right? He's working to keep up with the Joneses all of the time. And then on the other hand, he sees somebody who has no productive time, right? Here's one dude who's working himself to the bone so that he can keep up. And then on the other side, he's got a man who's not doing anything. One guy who has no leisure, and one guy who has no productivity. And he's wasting his life. He has no purpose, like is mentioned here, right? So what's the solution? Verse 6 gives us the solution, okay? What is the solution? Let's look at verse 6, and we'll be done tonight. He says, better is a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. He sees a fourth man. He sees the industrious man. He sees he sees this idle man. And now he comes and he sees this integrated man, or this man of integrity. And the answer again, he says, better is a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. You know what the answer is? And this is an answer to a lot of things in life. It's a word that I hear myself repeating over and over and over again. And it is this one word: balance. The solution was somebody who could be productive and quiet. A person who doesn't get caught up in the rat race, but also doesn't run from his responsibilities. In other words, in this verse, he says, the idea is, why have both hands full of profit if it costs you peace of mind and even possibly your health? He says it's better off for you to have gain in one hand and quietness in the other. Why try to grab it all but have no peace and potentially no health, than to have a hand that's productive but a hand that's quiet? Better is a handful with quietness than both hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. And sometimes this happens, but sometimes it's like people are reading my notes. The final verse I wanted to share with you is 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 6, where Paul says to Timothy, but godliness with contentment is great gain. Because Terry Cross says, Paul says, I have learned to be content in whatever situation I'm in. He says, godliness with contentment is great gain. Fred Clayton, life is supposed to be a balance. Yes, it is. And that is exactly what Solomon is coming to the conclusion of. We don't need to get caught up in the rat race to keep up with everybody. But I also don't shirk my responsibility. It's properly done. Life is properly done, not as the industrious man who just works and works and works and is competitive to where or that's his main goal, and that's where he gets his worth in life. But also not the idle man who's lazy and does nothing and self-destructs. But this balance of fulfilling my responsibilities, but also leading a quiet and peaceable life. Somebody one time said this, I don't know who it is, but I thought it was a great statement. You can take what you want from this life, but you must pay for it. You must pay for it. Listen, you can use all of your life to work and to labor and to do and to get ahead and do all those things, but you have to pay for it with something. You have to pay for it by ruining a relationship, by not giving something the time that it should have. You might pay for it with your own health. You can take more out of this life. You can have more money in the pocket. You have more money, more things than you could shake a stick at. But you have to pay for it. It's going to cost something. We need to be reminded you can take something from this life, but you must pay for it. When we come back next week, we'll look at some of the other places that he goes to in chapter 4. We've already looked at the courtroom, which is kind of the political scene. He goes to the marketplace, which is the everyday, daily laborer. He also goes to the highway and spends a little bit of time with the traveler. And then he goes to the palace, place he's used to look at life from the perspective of the king or the leader. And we'll do that together next week when we jump back into Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And we want you to certainly join us then next week at 7 p.m. Actually, you know what? I have this written on here incorrectly, and I'll try to remember to say it on Sunday as well. And that is that we will have this on Thursday next week at 7 p.m. I'm just making a small adjustment to it. It's going to be on Thursday, not Wednesday next week at 7 p.m. And yes, obviously we're keeping up with the weather and everything that's going on. And the Grove has already contacted us and said, hey, what's your plan? And I told them right now we're still planning to meet on Sunday, but obviously we're watching to see what's going to happen. The reality is we could get a whole bunch of snow or we could get a whole bunch of rain. We just don't know yet. And so I don't want to make a decision on that until we know exactly what it's going to look like. We'll try to communicate with you as we know and let you be aware of what's happening on Sunday. So stay safe. We love you guys. Appreciate you tuning in. And we'll let you know until the next time we see you. Keep looking up. Keep looking up. And we'll see you next week. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. And I hope you have a good night.